today I want to give you the top 6 that I recommend, products and tools to get started with beginner alcohol ink, so you're not having to buy tons of stuff, and a few suggestions along the way. Okay, tip number 1, a respirator, and I would recommend having something like this so that you're really not smelling all those fumes all the time while you're painting, because they do get pretty smelly. I'd also suggest having a good ventilated area where you can open the door or the window, and then just to protect your hands a little bit, I would also have some gloves. I'm not sure of the effects on your skin. I'm sure your skin absorbs it, so I would definitely wear some gloves as well. Okay, number 2 most obvious thing that you need is alcohol inks, and there's so many colours, and Tim Holtz do a really good thing where they match. They do a pack of 3, so you can always get those colours always work really nicely together, because the rules of colour theory do apply to the alcohol inks, but it changes a bit because you get so many different colours that come through. So I'm going to share the top 5 for me. I love Pool. This is by these are all by Tim Holtz brand. I do use Pinata as well, and also if you're in the UK I use Jackson a little bit, but mostly I use the Tim Holtz, because I find a lot of the colours, they don't just have the colour that comes out the bottle. When you start thinning it out, you get lots of different colours that come through. So these are my probably top 5 favourites. So I've got Pool, I've got Raspberry, and then the next 3 do produce like different colours. So I've got Currant, Denim, this is definitely one of my favourites, and surprisingly I love Black as well. You get so many cool colours that come out of this. Number 3 is your mixing agent. So like for acrylic or watercolours you would have water, and you need something to dilute the inks as they come out the bottle. You can use them as they are, but it's nice to dilute them and you get lots of different colours and things happening. So some people use the blending solution, which come with the Tim Holtz brand. I don't particularly enjoy that. I find it quite sticky, so I don't use that one at all. But then so I use isopropyl alcohol, and there's kind of a few strengths that you can get. Trust me, I tried 70% first, and this is before I knew very much about inks, but I would avoid this, because what that means is it's not pure alcohol. It is diluted with water, and you'll find that the inks that have mixed with this, that is diluted with water, it doesn't mix very well on your canvas or your paper, I guess. So I'd always recommend going at least 90%. In the UK I just get this and it's 99.9, so you can't really get much higher than that, and you just have a smooth, it just mixes really nicely with your inks. And then to use the isopropyl alcohol, I would recommend either getting one of these pipettes, which are pretty cheap. You can get pretty good pack of these for a fairly cheap price. So you could just put your isopropyl in a pot and then just suck it up, and then you can do little drops. But I find these are a lot better. These needlepoint, they have a very controlled amount that comes out. Sorry, can you see? Of there, so it's just a little bit more control with this. You can get different sizes, but those are 2 options that you could use. You could also dip into a brush and dot that in, but I find that would be a little bit harder. Number 4 is the substrate. So what can you work on? There's quite a few options with the inks. I'm going to give you my least to most favorite. So photo paper. There are some good brands out there. I haven't found one that works, and haven't spent tons of money on finding lots that work, because I found other paper that's better. But photo paper is apparently quite good. I do find that it seeps through and you don't get the same movement as other surfaces, so it just depends on what you like. So there's photo paper. So there's canvas as well. just regular canvas. Some people gesso this again. Usually they come gessoed, but you can gesso it again and try working on top of gesso. But I find that it still stains the canvas rather than moves really nicely. It just absorbs it too much. And for me, what I like about the inks is that they move around a lot, and you get this really organic look rather than staining. So not one of my favorites, but worth trying. This one is quite good, but I do find them hard to last. But this is a tile, ceramic tile. You could go with any color, but obviously white's going to show the color better. And you want it where it's glazed. You don't want anything that's the raw surface, because again that would absorb the ink. Yeah, you want the glazed side to work on. They're really nice for beginners. You can just kind of put some inks down, play around with it, and then you can wipe it off again. It seems like a bit of a waste, but when you're learning, it's quite nice just to kind of go back and forth and not waste a ton of money on paper as well, because you can go through paper pretty fast. So that leads me to my next one, which is Yupo. This is a really good beginner one. It is of the thinner level of paper, but it still works really nicely. You put your inks down and it moves pretty nicely. You can, if you've got this under a piece of cardboard, say, you can kind of lift it up and move the inks around and have really good fun. And it does stain a little bit, but it does move around quite nicely as well. So I prefer to buy the large sheets of Yupo if I'm using Yupo, and it's and then just cut it to size. This one is quite thick. I think it's like the middle grade of paper that you can get, but it just means that you can get a little less staining, and you get a lot of movement. And if you're using a hairdryer, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, the tools, you're not going to get as much warping the thicker the paper is. Okay, another option is vinyl. So you can get this type of thing. It's got like sticky back plastic, so you could stick it down onto wood. So that's always an option as well. I've not really played around with that too much, but it definitely works. And then my favorite to work on is actually the wooden canvases. So it's a nice firm substrate, and you're not going to get any warping or anything like that. But then if you were to work straight on the wood, it would absorb it. So I actually use paint down and enamel. So I use do about 3 coats, let that really dry for a good few days, and then I work on top of that. So you do get a little bit of staining, but not much. And the more you work, you can remove the color, because that's how I work sometimes. Part of the process for me is putting color down, but also removing it to get the effects that I want. Sometimes it does seem to lift the enamel a little bit, even though it's dried, but I actually don't mind it. It doesn't seem to affect the way that it works too much. Okay, so number 5 is the tools that you need. A few suggestions. I like brushes, just to kind of move things about just little bits at a time, but definitely not essential. But if you do have them, get the really, really small ones. Some people use a straw. I wouldn't suggest blowing through this, especially if you've got a mask on. It's not going to be possible. But I still use a straw sometimes, just to kind of lay down and move when it's really, there's lots of alcohol and isopropyl in there, I move the inks around, just try and get different effects. So you can use a straw for that reason, but I wouldn't blow through it, because you do end up inhaling probably more than if you just didn't have a mask on. Another one that I use is paper towel, but also cotton buds as well. So this is really good just to take off little sections and kind of create some highlights and things like that in there. So I really like those. Another tool that you might use is a hairdryer, just a regular hairdryer. Sometimes they have cool settings, which is great, because if you're working on Yupo, if it gets too hot as you're trying to move the inks around, it's actually going to warp the paper, and I've not found that it goes back to its original shape very easily, especially the thinner paper. If it's thicker, sometimes it still warps, but it kind of, when it reduces, the heat reduces, it tends to kind of flatten again, but it's still risky. So if you are going to use the hairdryer, try and use it on a cold setting, or use something that has a cold setting for that. Two of my favorite tools for moving, you know, using air to move around is a lens blower. So these are designed for cameras to clean out lenses and things, so you can just get some quick movements with that. But my most favorite is called the World's Tiniest Leaf Blower, and it normally comes with a black end, but I use it without. And it's just USB, so it just plugs right in, and it has pretty good power to it to kind of move things around. And it's cold air, so you don't get any warping or anything like that. Obviously you wouldn't get warping if you're working on the wooden canvases, but yeah, on paper, these are my two favorites regardless, so really great tools. Number 6 is kind of like a bonus number, definitely not needed just to get started, but it's fun to play around with, is masking fluid. So this is used in watercolor mostly, where they put down their sketch and then they go back through with a paintbrush or a tool just to mark off where all the highlights are and where they want to keep their widest bits on the painting, because watercolor technically doesn't have white, so they use the paper as their highlight. So by putting this down where they want all the light bits, then when they're finished the painting they can peel it off and they're left with their bright bits. You can buy these, you can either use like a cotton bud or a paintbrush, or you can get these special tools that they're kind of rubberized ends, so it peels right off once it's dry, which is really handy. I've just actually found these, which is quite nice. But previously I would just take a brush. It does ruin your bristles, so use a brush that you don't care for as much anymore. But a tip to get them to peel off a little bit, so you've not got, otherwise it just builds up and it ends up, you can't get any of it off. So I would dip this into washing up liquid, your dish soap or whatever. Just dip it into that a little bit and then dip it into your masking fluid and paint it on. So when you're using this, you literally put it onto your Yupo or your whatever surface you're working on, and let it dry, then work on top with your inks, and then when you're done you can just rub it and it peels right off. So those are my top 6 things that you might need for beginner alcohol inks. If you have any questions, pop them in the comments below. Otherwise I will see you on the next video. Thanks for watching.